As I noted, the other major headlines that we're following are here in Geneva, where some of the details of that U.S. agreement with Iran are starting to come into focus. But the emphasis is on the word some here. We're learning also tonight about a pretty intense debate that was shaping up between Trump officials before this deal was even signed. Over the last 2 weeks, the president's national security team was meeting nearly every day to talk about this evolving deal, with many of them concerned that Iran was not going to hold up its end of the bargain. Officials tell my colleague Elena Treen that at various points, nearly every senior official, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, were raising serious reservations about it. The CIA Director, John Ratcliffe, and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, were also among what was described as the, quote, most pessimistic about whether or not the Iranians would honor their commitments to make substantive concessions on their nuclear program, even if they had agreed to negotiate on that issue. Still, sources say that they ultimately reached the president's driven consensus, which was, quote, we want to get this thing over with. Now, as for when we might see this agreement, here's what the president himself said today.
Well, because I'd like to get a formal setting first before we do that, but I have no problem with that. It's a good document. Actually, I'll not only release it, I'll probably have a press conference and read it to you word by word.
Pence is on CNN with Kaitlan Collins to talk about Trump's Iran deal. I do think a lot of us conservatives are perplexed about the deal, but I don't think Pence is the one to talk about it. He's selling his book on this episode, and it's literally about how Trump didn't govern as a conservative. The way that I view this deal, it at least proves that Trump is not driven by anybody, including Jared Kushner and Witkoff. Let's have a watch.
Now, when the vice president was asked about the same thing, he said it's because they want to, quote, do it the right way.
The reason why we haven't released it yet is there are some delicate diplomatic things going on where the Iranians, and not just the Iranians, but some of our mediators, the Pakistanis and the Qataris, have asked us to sequence this in the right way. I don't, frankly, fully understand it, but there are sensitivities that exist in the Arab and Muslim world that we're trying to be responsive to. Now, if they comply with this deal, I think it's much better for the United States, and it's going to be much better for Iran. But if they don't comply with the deal, the straits are still open. We've still done incredible damage to their nuclear program, and is really, we can get on with our lives as a country.
Here to talk about that and a lot more is the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, who has a new book out that is titled What Conservatives Believe, Rediscovering the Conservative Conscience. The former Vice President, thank you for being here. We'll talk about your book in a moment. On what's shaping out with Iran so far, does it make sense to you why the administration has still, 48 hours later, not released the text of that agreement?
Well, Kaitlan, look, Iran has been at war with the United States and our cherished ally Israel for 47 years. And I strongly supported the president's decision for the first time in modern history to take the fight directly to the mullahs in Tehran last year and then again this year. And I do believe the president has earned some latitude in negotiating an end to hostilities. But I have very real concerns. Apparently like an awful lot of people on the, I just don't trust the Iranians. I've been too close to those issues from my time in the White House, many briefings in the Situation Room, as well as my years on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House. So, I mean, the Iranians, particularly with regard to their nuclear ambition, have essentially a legacy of lies. They lied their way through the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. We tore that up during the Trump-Pence years. Joe Biden returned to the politics of appeasement. And at least what we're hearing echo out of this potential memorandum of understanding, it smacks of appeasement. I mean, it sounds a bit like what I write about in my book, that the progressive left has long embraced appeasement against our adversaries like Iran, but there are voices on the populist right that would have us pull back from our role as leader in the free world. I don't think this is the time to pull back. I don't think this is a moment for appeasement, and I think I would urge the president to stand firm on the fundamental elements that Iran has to dismantle, and abandon its nuclear program, dismantle its ballistic missile program, renounce the support of terrorist organizations, and restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
I mean, they keep talking about what a good deal it is. Obviously, we have not been able to see it for ourselves. Do you agree with I mean, you know the president really well. Do you agree with David Urban that if it really was a good deal, the president would stay around to sign it himself publicly and pass out pens like he does with so many executive orders on a daily basis?
I'd like to see us be at a place where the president would do just that, and that we would see people in both political parties in this country cheer it on. But look, at least what we're hearing about this, I mean, think about it. The language that has come out, and you're closer to sources there in Geneva than the rest of us, but the language that has come out, there's no mention of dismantling the nuclear program or the ballistic missile program. There's no commitment to ending support for Hamas, Hezbollah, or other terrorist organizations. But in contrast to that, there is immediate sanctions relief from the moment the MOU is signed. I mean, that could be upwards to $3 billion a month into the coffers of the Iranian regime. There's a pledge of $100 billion in Iranian frozen assets being freed up. At least some of the language that's leaked that would be released even before a final deal is struck in the event of progress. And then finally calling for the United States and others to arrange for a $300 billion reconstruction fund when the IRGC and radical Islamists continue to be at the helm in Iran is deeply ill-advised. And again, I believe it smacks of the kind of appeasement that we saw during the Obama years, the kind of appeasement that Joe Biden tried to accomplish and was ignored by the Iranians, and we rejected categorically during the first Trump administration. I think the president should just simply stand firm, draw that red line, and if the Iranians won't come to those fundamental terms that are in the interest of our security, Israel's security, and the peace and stability of the region, then I think we ought to let the armed forces of the United States open the strait and eliminate the threat on our terms.
I mean, the president's not signing it. Vance, the vice president, is going to be here on Friday signing it. I mean, you know how the president approaches these things, how he thinks about them. By having Vance be the point person in these negotiations and in signing this, do you think he's being positioned to take the heat if this goes awry?
Well, look, when I was vice president, I had one answer with one notable occasion when the president asked me to step into a role, and I said, I'm here to serve. And I respect the vice president's role here, but I know who's making the deal. You know, nothing's changed in this new Trump administration from the last one, as far as I can see. I mean, the president is the one that's green-lighting this tactic and this strategy. And if I was still at his side, you know, I would urge him to go back to his first instincts when it comes to Iran, and that is peace through strength. You know, I don't know how we're going to have greater leverage over what remains of that terrorist regime in Iran after we go into another 60 days or more of a ceasefire and negotiations. Now is the moment to stand firm, and quite frankly, if Iran is not convinced that they are defeated and need to come to the table and yield on those points, then we ought to allow the armed forces of the United States and our ally Israel to convince them. So,
I mean, pretty bluntly, it sounds like you think, from what we know so far, this is a mistake by the Trump administration.
Well, it's much bigger than a mistake. I mean, you know, when the president took that historic step to strike those nuclear facilities last year, this is the first time in 47 years that an American president had taken the fight directly to the mullahs in Tehran. And America was safer as a result. And the fact that he tried diplomacy for the following year to begin to make progress, and then finally recognized that we just got to take the fight to them, launched Operation Epic Fury. Our military responded brilliantly. But in this moment, the posture that we're getting from the Iranians, but My concern is what appears to be leaking out, these immediate concessions, particularly sanctions waivers right out of the gate that would essentially be a lifeline to the Iranian regime. I think is ill-advised. We ought to keep the pressure on, keep the blockade on, and if need be, let our armed forces get back to work.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point in terms of, I mean, the administration keeps saying that it's performance-based, that sanctions relief, being able to sell oil, maybe getting their assets unfrozen. I mean, it seems like it's happening quickly. We'll have to see what the MOU says. But when you were in office with the president, your administration, the Trump-Pence administration, criticized the Obama-era nuclear deal for unfreezing $50 billion in Iranian assets. I mean, if what happens here, and they get 6 times that amount, plus potentially $100 billion, another, $100 billion and funds that are being unfrozen. I mean, do you think that's a defensible position for this Trump administration?
Well, whether it's a defensible position or not, it is the wrong position. I mean, to throw a lifeline to the Iranian regime when they are weaker and more isolated than they have ever been in history, I think would be a historic error. We have an opportunity right now to continue to pressure either just through the blockade or through additional use of force. We have the opportunity here to really end 5 decades of threats to the American people, to our cherished ally Israel, and to the region as a whole. Make no mistake about it. The pledge to renounce the pursuit of nuclear weapons, Iran has made that promise again and again and again. It was always built on lies. The only thing that would be acceptable here is the verifiable dismantling of their nuclear program, their ballistic program, renouncing terrorist support and organizations. You know, there's an old adage that says, trust but verify. But if I was sitting next to the president, I would say, Mr. President, this deal should verify and then trust. We should demand that Iran, under the economic and military pressure we and Israel have placed on them, come to the table and verifiably abandon the course they've been on for 5 decades.
You mentioned the one moment where you did not do what the president wanted you to do is pretty notable. It was obviously in reference to overturning the election on January 6th. You have a new book out that is titled about what conservatives believe. And you talk about the president's agenda so far in his second term. And you say that he has not always governed as a conservative. You write, to make matters worse, many Republicans have rushed to align themselves with every aspect of Trump's agenda, even when it has clashed with the traditional beliefs of conservatives. But, you know, in this moment, and as we're watching what's happening in these races tonight, when the president has successfully primaried Republicans who did push back on him, they get primaried out of Congress. I mean, what options are left for Republicans who do disagree with the president, in your view?
Well, look, as we learned in state legislative races in Indiana, and we saw in Louisiana and Kentucky, Texas, and with his endorsement tonight having its good effect in the Senate race for Mike Collins. I think the president enjoys a well-earned level of appreciation from Republican primary voters who defer to him in his choices. After 10 years of battling the radical left, I know that appreciation is there. I witnessed it firsthand for the 4.5 years we were together and since. But what I say in my book is that there is a movement, as the Democratic Party is overtaken by the progressive left and embraces socialism, there's a movement of the populist right that would take the president's periodic departures from the conservative agenda and equate that with the support that he has among Republicans. I truly do believe this administration, Kaitlan, has gotten a lot right. They are rebuilding our military. As I said, they've taken on Iran like no previous administration ever. They extended their tax cuts. They secured the border after the worst border crisis in history. All of that is good. But the stops and starts on Ukraine reflect the isolationist views of many on the populist right, some big government programs, tariffs, nationalization. But I still believe the majority of people that ever vote Republican, and that's Republicans and independents and many Democrats, still embrace that broad mainstream conservative agenda that's defined our party for 50 years. And that's why I wrote What Conservatives Believe.
Former Vice President Mike Pence, thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. That new book, What Conservatives Believe, is out now. Appreciate your time as always.
I hate to say that I mostly agree with Mike Pence on his views of this deal, and the facts are mostly intact, I think. I do need to research further, and I do need to read about it. But I mostly sort of agree with him. But the thing is, it's a dirty move for CNN to host a hawk to criticize Trump, because I thought CNN was against the war. So it seems to me CNN is here to nitpick. Trump is ending the war, he's putting America first, and he's not driven by any particular people group, as they've been singing about. And they're now bringing a supposedly conservative guy to attack Trump. It seems like CNN's primary purpose is to demean Trump. So, I don't know about you. If you enjoyed my breakdown, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.